Jamie, thank you so much for joining us on the Scholarship GPS podcast. I have been looking forward to this conversation for a while.
Thank you
If you
so
would just give
much.
us a quick introduction of who you are.
Yes, I'm Jamie Smith. I'm an independent educational consultant and I specialize in transfer. I've been in the education world for decades, but in the last 10 or so, I've really gotten involved in transfer admissions and that sort of pathway to college.
Fantastic. Well, that was why I wanted to have you on the show. I see lots of different stats about how common it is for students to transfer during their college career. So, since you are the expert here, can you tell us how common is it for students to transfer?
It's actually incredibly common. About a third of all undergraduates transfer at some point before they graduate. And
Okay.
of those who transfer, about half of them transfer more than once. So it is
Wow.
incredibly
Okay.
common to transfer. And it's just that people don't talk about it a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what are some of the reasons that students are transferring colleges?
Yeah. So the transfer population is split about 50-50 between students who are planning to transfer in that they are starting at a community college and going to a 4 year after, and those who go straight to a 4 year and then something happens and they want to switch. So,
Okay.
the first group is kind of obvious. They transfer because they want to get a degree.
Yep.
In the second group, it varies and it could be anything from, social reasons, the wrong fit, students who didn't really do all their research in advance and landed somewhere where they're not really well matched to the school. Sometimes it could be about the major. They're taking their gen eds and they find out that they really love a topic that
Mhm.
isn't a major at that school, and so they have to switch. Other times it's about geography and getting closer to home, or there are lots of reasons, personal and academic, that students decide to transfer.
Yeah. Yep. Well, let's you said it's kind of split between the two different populations. So let's set the community college population aside for a minute, and I do want to get to that because I think it's important. But particularly for students who are transferring from a 4 year to a 4 year, what are some of the pitfalls that you see?
Yeah, probably the biggest pitfall is not planning for the transferability of credits. A lot of
Okay.
students assume that if they're attending an accredited college, they will be able to transfer all of their credits and just continue smoothly with their degree plan. And
Hmm.
that's usually not the case. There's a
Okay.
whole transfer credit review process that students have to go through. They often need to submit some backup information. It's very common for an accepting university to ask you for your syllabus. And a lot of
Hmm.
students don't save those as they're going through
Yeah.
classes. So, shout out to all the students out there, save your syllabi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if you're doing dual enrollment, save the syllabus because that might be the only way you get credit.
Yep.
And then even when they get the transfer credit evaluation report, reading it carefully and looking for where credits are being applied generally as
Hmm.
electives and where they're actually being applied to your degree plan.
Right.
We see a lot of transfer credits loss in the process. And then we
Hmm.
see a lot of students who think they've gotten all their credits, but really they're all being applied as electives. And
Right.
it's going to greatly extend their graduation timeline.
Yeah. Yep. So, I mean, from what I'm hearing, then this is both causing issues for the length of time they're going to be in school,
Hmm.
which therefore results in a financial implication.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
yep,
exactly.
yeah. Okay. Well, then let's look at the community college side. What are some of the benefits to starting at a community college? I think cost is going to be one of the
Cost
most
is
obvious
huge. Yeah.
ones. But are there some other benefits to starting there? And then when it comes to that transfer process from community college to the 4 year, what are some of the pitfalls you see there?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of community colleges. And actually, knowing everything that I know, being in this business, I sent my own daughter to a community college. That
Okay.
was the right place for her to start,
Mhm.
just financially and maturity and exploration. She wasn't totally sure what she wanted to study. So community colleges are fantastic. They are usually much less expensive than the 4 year
Yep.
universities. And so many states now have free community college
Right.
programs or really reduced
Mhm.
cost community college programs. So there's definitely a financial savings there. And then a lot of a lot of these programs have much smaller class sizes. So like I
Yeah.
went to a big public university and, I was in first year lecture halls with 500,000 students,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think the biggest class my daughter had was maybe 40 students. So,
Okay.
they tend to be smaller classes with a lot
Hmm.
of discussion. And you also get a lot of teachers who are really there to teach. At a university, you often get professors who are interested in research more than teaching. It's not across the board, but it's
Hmm.
common at, R1 research universities
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
And at a community college, they're really there because teaching is their profession. And
Right.
I always like to tell the story. One of my daughter's very favorite teachers at community college was an English teacher, and she ended up becoming an English major.
Okay.
And he had a PhD from Stanford, and
Wow. Okay.
he just loved teaching. And so
Yeah.
he was at the community college because that was the profession he wanted to be in. And I think
Yeah.
that's just a great example of one of the benefits of community college. You get the people who are there to teach, and that's what they're focused on most of the time.
Right, right. Yeah, that I honestly hadn't even thought about that, but I was in some of those big lecture halls myself,
Yeah.
and you're a face in a crowd, and you're not
Yeah.
getting any personal attention that you might need. Of course, professors are required to have office hours, but um, that may or may not work out for you.
Right.
So that small class size can
Yeah.
can be very helpful. Yeah,
Yeah. And also, at community college, I always tell the students, like, this is kind of your chance to practice things like going to
yeah,
office hours. It's a little less intimidating to go to
yep,
office hours for a professor that's, a teacher in a 30 student classroom. It's not quite as
mhm,
scary to go visit them in office hours. So it's a good
yeah,
place to practice those things and, try out different subjects with low risk, low financial risk for
right,
sure.
right.
And the expense, I mean, not even just the lower tuition, but if you can live at home and commute, you're
Hmm.
saving money that way. Students who need a little more time to mature and gain independence, they have
Hmm.
that time to do that. There's so many benefits.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Well, let's talk finances and particularly scholarships. What are
Yes.
some of the scholarship implications for transfer students?
Yeah, so it really depends on if you're looking at community college or 4 year to 4 year. So, in the
Okay.
4 year to 4 year realm, if you've gotten a merit scholarship at your first university, first off, note that's not going with you.
Yeah.
Outside scholarships, you'll have to talk to the organization and get it transferred, make sure everything's fine there. But if the school itself gave you merit, there's no transfer of that, and there's no guarantee that your next university is going to offer you anything similar.
Hmm. Right.
A lot of people think, oh, there aren't any transfer scholarships, and that's a myth. There are lots
Yep.
of transfer scholarships out there. They do tend to be lower dollar amounts, though. So
Right.
if you've gotten a very generous merit scholarship at one college and you go to transfer, you may be eligible for another merit scholarship. It's probably going to be a lower dollar amount, so keep that in
Hmm.
mind.
Yep.
But there are outside scholarships too. In fact, there are some just for transfer students.
Yeah.
There are some
Yep.
organizations that just want to support transfer students.
Yeah. Yep.
When you're looking at the community college to 4 year route, it's a little bit different because a lot of
Hmm.
states have these planned transfer pathways.
Right.
For example, in the University of California system, the lot of their scholarships, their merit scholarships, a lot of the UC campuses have very similar scholarships for first years and transfers.
Okay.
So, you're saving money on community college and then you're eligible for a similar merit scholarship. So,
Right.
it's a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
A lot of those state systems have similar pathways like that.
Hmm.
But if you're looking outside the individual colleges, there are wonderful organizations that support transfers coming from community colleges. My favorite is Phi Theta Kappa. You
Yep.
would join a Phi Theta Kappa club at your community college, and then you have their support in applying for colleges, applying for scholarships. There are some universities that only offer transfer scholarships to Phi Theta Kappa members. So
Okay. Hmm.
if you're looking at that route, definitely seek out Phi Theta Kappa because that could be a real win.
Yeah. Well, I know we're not here to necessarily promote Phi Theta Kappa, but if I remember correctly, you do have to meet certain
Yes,
academic
it's an
requirements,
honors
right? Yeah,
organization.
it's an
Yeah.
honors organization. So maybe not the perfect analogy, but it's a bit like NHS for
Hmm.
community college.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yep.
Or like an honors program, graduating cum laude or something with
Right.
your 4-year university. It's like that at the 2-year level,
Yep.
and then with the added benefit of scholarship opportunities.
Yeah, yep. Well, I do want to just kind of reiterate one thing that you mentioned somewhat in passing about the outside scholarships,
Yes,
and that is for a student who knows they're going to be transferring, outside scholarship should definitely be on your radar because I am not aware of any outside scholarship that it would be renewable, where if you start at college A and then transfer to college B, they're going to say, no, you can't keep it.
yeah,
Could that be out there? Probably, but I mean, it's almost vanishingly zero. So,
yeah,
unless you read that in the fine print, I wouldn't
yeah,
worry about that.
yeah.
One of my big pitches
I
that,
always say, ask questions before you make decisions.
yeah,
I want
yeah,
to, I
yep,
just tell everybody, ask for sure before you
sure,
do
yep,
anything drastic, because
yeah, yep.
everybody can make up their own rules. So,
Yeah, yep, absolutely. But I think, almost without exception, if you earn an
yeah,
outside scholarship that's renewable, as long as you meet those requirements, which is
yes,
usually a minimum GPA, most of these organizations are happy to send it to a different college the second, third,
exactly.
fourth year. So, yeah, absolutely a great way to maybe overcome one of those pitfalls we talked
Yes,
about early on.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, I did want to ask you about your book. What is the title? What's it
Yes.
about? And who's it for?
It's called The Complete Guide to College Transfer, and it's pretty self explanatory in the title there.
Yep.
It really is a detailed guide for students and their families, walking you through the whole transfer process from, first thinking, should I transfer, to searching for universities, figuring out a transfer plan, looking at agreements like transfer guarantees. A lot of states have
Okay.
those. If you're at a community college and want to go to one of the state universities, there's often a guarantee program if you meet certain requirements. Looking at the transfer credit evaluation reports, deciding if you're really getting the credit that you deserve there,
Mhm.
and looking at the possible downfalls. Are you going to have to spend more time at your next university? It's
Right.
it's common that students do have to spend a little extra time,
Mhm.
depending on how their credits transferred or didn't transfer. So really looking at all of that, all the way up to settling in at your new university, meeting with an advisor there, planning out your next steps once you're there, getting the classes right away, making sure you don't repeat classes when you're
Hmm.
there,
Yeah. Right.
all of those things that I think students often aren't aware of. You go to the bookstore and you see a million titles about first year admissions and really
Right.
nothing about transfer. And it is quite a different process. There are a
Yep.
lot of other factors to take into account. So I felt like there needed to be a resource out there for students, especially since, students are trying to save money often when they're going the
Yep.
community college route, or, they've already done the first year process and it didn't go the way they wanted. I feel like to do transfer, you really need some extra help, and it needs to be not expensive help. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah,
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, you're absolutely correct. There's so much information about first year admissions and all of that, and that's great. But you said a third of students transfer, so
yes.
I think a third of those people who needed that first year information are going to need this transfer information. So
Exactly,
yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And, I also want to give a shout out to like community college advisors. They're wonderful,
Yeah.
but with budget cuts, they have so much work to do. Students often find they have trouble getting appointments with advisors
Mhm.
because there just aren't enough of them. So
Yep.
I'm hoping to fill the gap a little bit, and, get that information out there so students can DIY it if they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will have a link to the book in the show notes. But is there any other way people could reach out and connect with you?
Yes, I have a website. It's transfersavvy.com. And there's a link to the book there, as well as some resources that go along with the book. I have a lot of like worksheets and,
Okay.
downloadable Excel sheets, things like that to help you go through the processes described in the book. So definitely check that out. I also have some just free resources on like admissions rates, transfer
Oh,
admission rates. They're often very different from first year admission rates.
okay.
That's sometimes a hidden benefit. Sometimes some of those very selective schools have higher admission rates for transfer students than they do for
Interesting.
first years.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you could do a little research there on my site as well.
Awesome. Well, we love the free resources, so we'll put links to your website as well.
Thank you.
Jamie, this has been really informative. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and look forward to having you back again sometime.
Yes, this has been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.